That short break, you are still watching live from Abuja studio, the market report on ADBN television. And quite interesting that our guest has already joined us right now to engage us on this aspect of investing in infrastructure for economic development in Nigeria. Honorable Tonye, Dan, a very good day to you and welcome to the show.
Hi, good to have you. Good afternoon.
All right, good afternoon. And quite interesting that you're on the show right now and as a professional and expert in the area of investment in Nigeria. But let me quickly ask you this particular question first. What is your review of the current state of infrastructural gaps in Nigeria? The current state of infrastructural gap in Nigeria, what's your review about it? I mean, what's your assessment? What do you have to tell us about it right now?
I think as a society, infrastructure would always be something that will be the bane of every establishment. Whether it's happening in Nigeria or it's happening elsewhere in the world. Infrastructure is something that daily government needs to keep investing and keep investing and keep investing and ensuring as the population grows, there's infrastructure to be able to cater for that population. So having said that, bringing it back to Nigeria, Nigeria faces like significant infrastructure gaps. You know, I mean, if you look at our transportation, energy, water supply, you know, poor road conditions, inadequate power supply, limited access to clean water and sanitation. All this will hinder economic growth. You know, our rural areas, particularly, you know, they suffer from underdeveloped infrastructure, which, you know, affects, you know, the overall development, you know, and equity of our society. So there's a lot of gaps in some of these sectors, like I said, I have enumerated. However, I see that the government is making significant steps to be able to, you know, to be able to work around this infrastructure. The question is those significant steps, are they effective enough? You know, those are questions that, you know, that probably need to answer.
All right. Now, talking about government, you know, from your own assessment, the government is trying as much as possible to invest in that area. But from your own total assessment of government investment, I said something earlier when I introduced the show. Under the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, over 11 trillion naira has been spent so far on infrastructural development. That's on the federal government level. We have not really cumulated the one of the state government are spending. But from your own assessment, as someone who have followed this trend for a very long time, do you think that what government is really putting on infrastructure is enough to really get us out of the gaps that we have faced so far?
With limited resources, with limited, you know, access to wealth, it might not be enough, but it is, you know, it is significant. You know, like you said, over 11 trillion has been invested by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And that figure, you know, having, you know, when you call it, it seems very big. But if we forget that, you know, our land size, our population size, you know, and all that is still very, you know, it's still very large. You know, so it might not be as effective. It might not be as we can't say it's enough, but it could be better. You know, that's what I would say. We can also see, you know, a lot of, you know, infrastructure on roads, infrastructure development on roads. You know, you can see what the federal government is doing, you know, in various roads. I think every part of this, every geopolitical zone is presently seeing one form of road infrastructure being done. Now, my challenge with those things is, are we actually getting value for the money being spent? You know, if you say we're investing 11 trillion, have we seen 11 trillion on our roads? And you know, how has that money, you know, changed, or what value have we seen on our infrastructure? You know, as a country, you know, that is another conversation, you know, that we need to look at. But however, in terms of the amount that has been spent so far and that is still going to be spent, I feel that we can do better. provided that the money is going to the right means and source.
Now, talking about that, we can do better, but there are people who have argued that it seems that the government have this kind of nonchalant attitude towards investing in infrastructure. I'll buttress this question with this argument. For instance, during the Buhari government administration, a lot of concentration was put on the rail infrastructure. Currently, the Tinubu government is putting a lot of concentration on road infrastructure, but there are other aspects of the infrastructure that we have seen government a little bit of shying away from. Take for instance the power sector. Even though the government have said they need $10 billion yearly to be able to address the challenge in the power sector, but much have not been said in that regard. Talking about hospitals, that means health sector, there's a little bit nonchalant attitude towards that spending money in that area. I won't be able to mention all of that aspects, but what I'm trying to ask is that why is it that we're having challenge of investing in infrastructure in Nigeria? From what I've just put to you right now.
Hello.
Are you hearing me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I lost you for a bit. Can you hear me?
Oh yes, now I'm hearing you now. Are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you now.
Okay, go ahead.
Now the question I'm asking is that why is it that we're having challenge of investing in infrastructure in Nigeria? Because from what we have seen so far is a bit of concentrating on road under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. During Buhari's period, we concentrate so much on rail development, but here we have other aspects of infrastructure that we are not spending much on. Honorable, are you there? Okay, we're having a network freeze right there, but hopefully maybe we'll join us soon. And the question I'm putting towards him is that we are having a challenge of investing in infrastructure in Nigeria.
Hello.
Okay, are you there? I can hear you.
I lost you for a bit, but if I heard what you said, you were asking challenges of the investment in infrastructure.
Exactly. That's what I'm asking.
Some of the key challenges. On top of the list which we mentioned earlier, I would say insufficient funding, and the financing mechanism. I will also see because of implementation, because I see a lot of gaps in the implementation part of even the ones the resources that we've spent. I will also see bureaucratic inefficiencies and corruption. I also say there's a lot of lack of long-term planning, and prioritization of projects. On top of my head again, obviously political instability, and then policy inconsistency, then all the regulatory hurdles that we face, in terms of infrastructure investment. So these are some of the issues. Like I said, I know this government is trying as much as possible to attract foreign direct investment, have a one-stop shop to be able for investors to be able to come into the country and ensure that there's a seamless process for them to be able to invest their money using the Office of the Presidential Enabling Business Environment, which the managing director of the MD of that place is. I have been following their activity, and I think she's doing an excellent job in trying to streamline the processes, take away the bottlenecks in customs, in immigration. I see, I see what they're doing, and I give them kudos in that regard, because that will be able to strengthen investor confidence, in the country. However, there's a lot, infrastructure, and government cannot do it alone. Government needs to be able to invite the private sector, and that's why I said I see what this government is doing, trying to ensure that the private sector is carried along, and they're able to also do a lot of PPP projects. The coastal road, I know, is a PP project. I think government just has about 30% stake in that. There's a lot of the roads, the northern road, the Kano, Maiduguri axis road. is also a PPP project. So like I said, there's a lot of infrastructure development going on. Like you said, last government concentrated on rail, which is a good thing. And I feel like we need to boost that process more, to be able to ensure that the country, is able to go around the country by rail, basically, not just by road or by air. That will reduce the pressure on our roads. It will reduce, it will bring a lot of competition with regards to pricing, and stuff like that. So there's a ripple effect of, if different areas of our infrastructure is actually properly developed and the implementation is actually done effectively.
Now, talking about effective implementation of the policy, one of the aspects that have drawn a lot of, laudable appraises of the government is that they have been calling on private sector to come in, and through the private sector, we can see a lot of initiative coming in that angle. But from your own concern, what is your take concerning private sector-led investment in infrastructure in Nigeria? Do you see that ripple effect of private sector coming to this scene or into this ecosystem, building up the best infrastructure in Nigeria? Because a lot of Nigerians quickly call out the issue of the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway that was handed over to the PPP arrangement, but that failed until federal government have to take it over and begin to do it themselves. Now, from your own understanding, do you think we also see need more private sector-led investment in our infrastructure in Nigeria?
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of this government. I will speak on this government because this is the government that we're giving a scorecard to. I would say that they have been able to gather a lot of private sector-led investment, strengthen that process. Like I said earlier, we have one of the agencies, which is the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Company. They have been able to streamline, or they are streamlining the process of ensuring seamless investment into the country, seamless foreign direct investment into the country, and also local investors, to be able to build investor confidence. I see what they are doing, and I said it will have a ripple effect, because once private sector sees that their money is, they are sure of their money, and they are sure of the policy that will not change tomorrow or change as a result of political instability, private sector individuals are quick to jump on it. And Nigeria is such a fertile society, such a fertile ground, for investors to be able to come in, because it's a largest, like there's a plethora of things that people can come in and invest in our country, But I think what has happened over time is that lack of investor confidence. And that's what this government has said, let us start going back to the drawing table and build investor confidence in our people, and that's what is happening. And I give, like I said, this is one thing I give kudos to this government for.
Now, talking about the private sector-led investment initiative that you highlighted, and the quite laudable from the part of the government to ensure that this comes to place. But for ordinary Nigerians, they will want to know what would be the benefit. The benefit. And you made mention of something. You talk about the long-term and immediate-term gains that could come from infrastructural development. So, what would be the benefit, either on the long-term or the short-term, when we have private sector-led initiative in infrastructural development in Nigeria?
For the short term, we can see quick delivery of projects. In terms of, because there's a lot with private sector, there's little or no bureaucratic necks or bureaucratic bottlenecks or hurdles, as you call it. And then for the long term, you can see, definitely you see jobs. We're shunning out young people every year. Thousands and thousands of people every year from our universities. You can see both white collar jobs and and other vocational jobs and non-white collar jobs. That people will be able to be gainfully employed. And stuff like that. So there's a lot of, once private sector takes over a lot of things, like in most developed countries, government focuses on policies. Government focuses on being a regulator. You know, the society is driven largely by private sector. You know, so I feel like we'll be better off if government takes a back seat on some of all these things and allow private sector to run it, so that it can be more effective. It can be, you know, better controlled, better handled, and government can be a regulator to ensure that the people are not shortchanged. Because, as you know, private sector will always look for an opportunity. Those are the negatives of that. You know, private sector will always look for an opportunity to reap or to get more profit. You know, so government will sit as a regulator to be on the people's side to ensure that private sector is able to come in and ensure and, you know, carry out work, get people gainfully employed, and the society becomes more established and fruitful and you know, successful.
Exactly. Now, talking about the private sector-led initiative, and you know what we have so far discussed right now, looking at the federal level, which you are quite familiar with, but I also know that you have been doing some work at the state level. But what would be your advice to state governors also taking the initiative in encouraging private sector-led infrastructural development at the subnational, that is the state level right now? I mean, the state government taking this initiative also as done by federal government.
Come again.
What I'm asking is that, you know, we have talked about the federal government side of allowing private sector-led initiative at the infrastructural level. Now, the state governors also need to take a cue and learn from what the federal government have been doing so far in allowing private sector to invest in infrastructure at the state level. So what would be your own advice to state governor? Because from your own understanding, your own experience, you have done some work at the area of the federal government, but at the state level, what would be your advice?
I think your network is.
Do you get me now? Okay. What I'm asking is that, what would be your advice to state governors to also allow private sector-led infrastructural development at their level?
Did you say state government to allow private
Yes.
sector-led development? Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Are you asking for the challenge?
No, I'm asking that, you know, what we have done so far on this show right now is that we have looked at the prospect of how federal government have been able to allow private sector-led infrastructural development. But we are seeing a lack of it at the state level. So what would be your advice to state governors to also take these lessons and, you know, apply it at their state level?
Okay.
All right.
So I feel like a lot of state government needs to tailor their infrastructure projects to the local needs and priorities of their people. You know, they need to foster public-private partnerships to leverage additional funding for some of the things that they want to do. They need to enhance capacity for their project management and implementation. This is such a big problem, especially at the state level. You know, like I said, state governments need to, you know, take a leap from maybe Lagos State, for instance, because when you look at Lagos State and their IGR, the next state coming after Lagos State is Rivers State, and it is not even close in terms of their, you know, internally generated revenue. So you see that a lot of states are lacking behind in their ability to be able to rejig their system.
All right, we have another network freeze there. Although we're not able to be back with us so that I can continue from his line of thought in regards to what will be his advice to the state government. But from what we have said so far, investing in infrastructure is very, very critical to any economy, either emerging economy, developing economy, or underdeveloped economy. Because one of the critical factors that will ensure that economy is sustained at any level is the level of your infrastructure. And when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about the road network, we're talking about the transport system, we're talking about the energy system. The energy system comprises of both fossil fuel energy or electricity energy. Then the other aspect has to do with communication. Then let's not forget human capital development. It's also part of the infrastructure. So because we have the hard infrastructure, we also have the soft infrastructure. Because what will sustain all this infrastructure we are talking about is the soft infrastructure that include the human capital. That's why most time when I'm talking about infrastructure, schools, health facilities is always mentioned, and not to also forget.
Hello?
Okay, you are back. Oh, yeah, you can continue from where you stop, Honorable.
Yes, so a lot of things they are lacking in a lot of areas, and they need to look into those areas more critically. Healthcare is such a big problem at the primary healthcare. At the primary healthcare level, education, human capacity development, which is very important. I don't know why we do not pay as much attention to human capacity development, because it is human beings that will be able to effectively implement your policies. And if they are not properly, like I said earlier, this government has done what needs to be done with regards to that, which is strengthen the policies to be able to ensure that private sector investors have confidence in government and in our society. So that's why they've gone ahead to develop, to ensure strengthen basically the presidential enabling business environment. Now that is critical, because you're bringing all the state actors together under one roof to say, look, when investors come in, what do they need? What do they require? Let's have a one-stop shop to be able to ensure that an investor comes in with his money and is able to seamlessly do what he needs to do to ensure that his investment is secure, his investment is sure, and that his return on investment is also, is also determined. So at the end of the day, I would say that before now, yes, there's been a lot of mutual distrust between private sector and government because of lack of, or let's say inconsistent policies, corruption, politics, or political instability, and stuff like that. So what I would advise is what they are doing, and I'll say take it further to ensure that once that investor confidence has been developed, the next thing that needs to be done is to now drive, the various sectors, have a program, have like a roadshow for these programs to be able to get more investors to come into these sectors and take over.
Now, talking about investors coming to the sector and taking over, what's your take on concessionary policy of the government? We have an institution called Infrastructural Concessionary Agency of Nigeria, ICRC, Infrastructure Regulatory Concession, yes, ICRC, that have been in place for over 15 years now. But a lot of Nigerians, when they hear the word concession, they get angry and think the government is handing over all those infrastructure, all those assets to individuals to go there and begin to loot or asset stripping. But from your own understanding in this aspect of the economy, what do you think about concessionary policy? Is it not necessary to also bring in this policy to strengthen it and ensure that we use it to also develop our infrastructure in Nigeria?
I think we have a lot of concessionary projects in this country. However, what I would say is that government has not been able to. You see, one of the challenges I have with government, at all levels, is their inability to be able to explain to the common man some of the things that they are doing. Because if they're able to explain to the people, and give proper accountability to the people, people will be less jittery with regards to some of these things that they do. However, I know, like I said, there's a lot of concessionary projects in this country that have been going on for a while, and I'm not sure they've had any issues thus far. However, like you said, some of these things needs to be strengthened. The agency needs to be given more life, and the agency themselves needs to explain to the people what they are doing. And so that people would have confidence in what they're doing, as opposed to just sitting down in their cocoon and doing what they're doing. Because people anything that people only complain when they don't understand something, and if you're not, if, as government, you're there for the people, you're not there for yourself. So you need to be accountable to the people, and yeah, so that's what I'll say about that.
Now, apart from concessionary policy, we also have what we call tax credit that allow businesses to be able to develop infrastructure.
Yes. A lot of, Dangote has tax credits.
Exactly.
Wa has tax credits. We have a lot of people who are, Dangote. I know the roads in Apapa is being done by Dangote, if I'm not mistaken, which gives him, tax credits to. I'm not sure of the figures yet or figures now, but I know that it gives him a lot of tax credits. I know that Boa Cement has also talked about, the tax credit to the tune of about 350 billion, if I'm not mistaken. So those are policies that government bring in to be able to enable businesses to be able to invest in infrastructure, in the areas that they function in. It is effective, and I know a lot of people who have benefited from it. It just needs to trickle down to other smaller companies, to be able to carry out some of all this infrastructure. Like I said, government cannot completely build the infrastructure of the country because it does not have the resources to do so. So what needs to be done is to let privates create an enabling business environment for private sectors to be able to thrive successfully.
Very interesting. But I will not quickly, forget to also mention the CRS of some companies. That means corporate social responsibility they also carried out. There was in the past that GTB Bank was doing a lot of CRS in the area of drainages as well as sanitary work in Lagos at a point in time. But for some period now, we have not been hearing big corporations doing CRS as part of infrastructure development in state. What do you think would have brought to that level that many companies don't do CRS as we do have in the past again?
I would not say many companies do not do, because I know quite a lot of them are still doing, carrying out their corporate social responsibility. And I know, if I'm not mistaken, I think what I would say is, because I've had issues to talk about this, I've had reason to talk about this before. What I would say is basically government should be able to set up something like a portal, where companies should be able to go to that portal and see areas where government needs help. Where government needs investment, or where government needs, intervention. That's the word. And then these corporations or businesses can go to that portal, register and say, okay, look, I have so amount of money to be able to do X, Y, Z in regards to this area that, companies should not just be allowed to decide that they want to do anything. It needs to be done based on the needs assessment of the areas those companies function in. You cannot, if for instance, you cannot come and say you want to do roads in an area where road is not a problem. So there needs to be proper needs assessment in those areas, and based on those needs assessments, corporations can now tailor their CSR to those needs, and thereby the people are able to benefit from those things. I know companies, especially in the south. I know a lot of oil companies that do a lot of CSR. So those things are there, but how effective are they, and how are the people feeling such policy, by corporations.
Exactly.
So those are things that need to be looked into, which will further help the private sector. By the time government sees that this is some of the things that private sectors are doing, then governments can now give other incentives to these corporations to enable these corporations to be able to do more or better in the area of CSR.
Exactly. Honorable, I really want to appreciate you for coming on the show today. It's quite enlightening and very educating from your perspective. Particularly, an expert like you understand how investment in infrastructure can really go a long way to help the economy to grow. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sir.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Anytime.
All right, sir. So hopefully, maybe in near future, I will still have to call on you anytime we have to discuss issue in this regard and other aspects that affect infrastructure in Nigeria. So thank you for coming on the show.
Anytime.
All right.
Thank you very much and have a good day.
Same to you.